So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We are delighted to have Susie Ramroop, a mindset coach with us today, who is going to conduct some speed mentoring with you. Susie has previously led breakout sessions at our Women into Leadership event, and very kindly is going to offer advice to you on how to become the leader that you would like to be, or to see, pardon. Sorry. And so, Susie, I'll pass over to you. And and just in terms of housekeeping, all of you have been put on mute. If you could please submit your questions into the chat, that would be absolutely wonderful. And then we'll get ready to go as soon as Susie has introduced herself in a little bit more detail. So over to you, Susie.
Thank you. So I'm going to try and not get distracted by that binging that keeps going. First of all, thank you for coming along and joining me today. Potentially you haven't attended a session like this before, and until November last year I hadn't given a session like this before, so I just want to explain to you how in the real world this would be happening if you were to attend such a session. And it's also buying you time to put your questions in the chat. This is going to be a very dull session without questions, so it doesn't matter at all what the subject of your question is. What I am attempting to do today is give you my best experience, and I am going to attempt to interpret what you say as succinctly and as clearly as possible, so that not only you get your question answered, but that everyone can hear the theme that potentially they can apply to themselves as well. So typing. So how this normally works is picture a kind of black tie event in a big room at a conference, set up lots of round tables, and I would normally get 10 minutes on the table. So 10 minutes would be up, music would play, bit like that kids game, the one with the chairs where you always have to sit down. So you move to the next table and you get another 10 minutes. And so I don't get much time to explain who I am. I do that in a very, very fast way, which I'm about to do, normally in 30 seconds to a minute. And in that time, I probably get to answer 2 people's questions, but all 9 people on the table benefit. So that's what I'm going to try and replicate today. How you get the most out of this session, therefore, is to have an expectation that you absolutely will come away with something useful. You might ask a question and get an answer, but you might learn more from someone else's question. So if you're feeling slightly, oh, do I really want to ask a question? Bluntly, don't be so selfish. Your question might help someone else. So please, no question is too basic or too convoluted or too anything. Just get your questions in the chat. I'm looking at slides to remind me what to say. There's a story I'd like to tell you of an event, a very large event that I spoke at last summer. And it was a facilitation of discussion. So I wasn't there to teach. I wasn't there to coach. I wasn't there to leave the audience with a conclusion. That was my brief. My brief was to stimulate debate. And in doing so, I was trying to get people in the audience to speak up. Is this sounding familiar? And I said to them, you're very quiet. There's 350 people in this room and there's maybe 4 people asking questions. Don't leave this room with a question unanswered. And I kept saying there's half an hour left. There's 15 minutes left. Okay, I'm going to wrap up in 10 minutes. And 5 minutes before the end, a dozen people put their hands up. Don't be those people. Ask your questions. Make sure you stay till the end, because you don't want to miss the one thing that you came here to get, and that could be the last thing. And I'm not pitching anything today, but I'm about to release a new book, and largely what I talk about is probably going to be covered in that book. So if we don't cover all the questions today, the book probably will cover those. So really quickly, my work history is, or my history is that I live in London. I have done all my life except university. I have a philosophy and literature degree, mainly because I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up. I was fired for my first 2 jobs. I worked in innovation and product development for about 14 years, both in tech and healthcare. I was a product development director. I trained as a performance coach in 2006. You've got about 2 minutes to get your questions in the chat. I was made redundant from my last 3 jobs. That was probably something telling me I just need to set up my own business, but I didn't listen, didn't have the courage. And I went freelance in 2014, and then I was bullied quite badly in 2015 in my last contract role. And that was when I said, this is it. I'm going to be a coach full time. It is the only thing I truly love to do. And whilst that time was quite painful, it is the best decision I ever made. Why am I telling you this? Because there might be something quite personal going on for you. There might be something that you deem a failure that you haven't quite mined for the gold yet. And I'm telling you that because hopefully you can see I'm in a position now where you might not have thought any of that was the case. So what do I do now? I have mapped my product development expertise across to people. Effectively today, you are my product. I would like to take you through your roadmap and paint a vision for you such that you can design your steps towards it. I deliver private coaching. I run fantastic retreats in the forest. The next one is in September. And I also run group masterminds. I am a devoted mother to an 8-year-old. She's amazing. I've made tons of mistakes. I've got loads of things I'm not proud of and embarrassed about. I didn't ever feel like I was good enough at work. I love sport. I use it as a mindset tool. I'm provocative. I won't be too provocative today, I promise. But I like to have fun, and this session hopefully will be that. I'm challenging, but I'm always kind with it, and the main reason for that is because I want you to get a result. So hopefully that gives you an insight into who I am. Hopefully that's bought you 5 minutes to get questions in the chat. How's the chat looking, I wonder? Lovely. Okay, so Grace, I think you might have to feed me some of these because this has moved quite quickly. If you've joined late, questions in the chat, we will get to them. Grace is going to facilitate this for me, I think, judging by the number in there. I've done a good job of dropping up trade here. And I will answer them as best I can. And I'll be honest, if it's about my experience or my coaching, or I go, don't know. That might happen. Grace, over to you. Do you want to pick one? Doesn't matter where we start.
Super. So we'll begin maybe, there are 2 similar questions, so we might put them together.
Okay.
So there's one question saying, how do I avoid getting overlooked for leadership positions? I feel like I have a tendency to highlight the areas where I lack skills rather than highlighting the areas where I bring a high level of expertise and a willingness to learn. And a similar question is around being at the same company for 15 years, an entry-level senior manager with a big network and respect at many levels, but this person feels that they've been pigeonholed for the things that they're good at and called upon for those things rather than being given the opportunities to branch out a little bit more.
Yeah, so both of those, so my answers are going to be fast, and they're going to be fast because I want to give as much benefit as possible. If you need more from me, I'll tell you how to do that at the end. Both of these questions are really about playing small. Now, that's not a judgment, that's just the way you're feeling with those questions is probably a bit fed up, possibly a bit resentful. How can I be working this hard and still be at this level? How can I get out of this pigeonhole that I have been placed in? Now, I did this for not for a massively long time, but, you know, I told you the story about me not starting my business until 2014 when I trained as a coach 8 years before. At any moment, I could have got out of my pigeonhole. I could have got off the management ladder. The problem was it wasn't bad enough. And so ask yourself, honestly, is the position you're currently in bad enough for you to do anything about? That's kind of away from motivation. Or have you got such a clear vision of what you want that it's motivating enough to draw you towards it? I already know which one of those you're in, because you're in your comfort zone, so you haven't got the vision. When you've got a vision, that's where your focus is. But currently your focus is on delivery And I'm guessing that your assumption is, yeah, but if I keep delivering here, someone's going to give me the job over there. They won't. And they won't because you haven't joined the dots and educated them on the fact that that's what you want. And potentially you haven't done it for yourself either. So the way I've written my book, the reason I wrote my book is for people like both of these questions, because I heard a phrase saying you can't be what you can't see. And it made me feel sick to my stomach. And I was agitated enough that I wrote a book to counter it. And really, if you inquire honestly about why it is that you're in those positions and take full responsibility, that means it's not up to anyone else to give you a job. It's not up to anyone else to notice how amazing you are. And I have no doubt that you are. It is up to you to decide what you want instead, hence your shift of focus, and to contribute to it every day. So the book is in that it's called Be the Leader You Want to See. You've already got what you need. You know that because you're currently sitting there overachieving probably in the job that you're in, wondering how on earth do you get to the next job? Instead, I would focus on being honest with yourself now, and that's what I call awareness. From that awareness, you will get a clear view of the brave steps that you need to take so that you feel like you're making a contribution to being a better leader in the future. It isn't down to anyone else. And I get that you might think that, oh, but I just want someone to recognize me and offer me the job. They might, but they'll offer you a job on the same level that you're currently performing at. And you'll get into this pattern of sideways moves. What you've got to do is get clear about where you are now and why it isn't good enough for you. You've got to be really clear about that, because if you're not, you'll always just settle. And you'll always be in this position where you're like, oh, why isn't this panning out for me? And those brave steps are not leaps of massive faith. They are just gentle nudges of your comfort zone that no one else is going to notice. And I really want you to hear this, that what I'm talking about and the way I talk about it in the book is to do gentle, tiny, barely noticeable things. But when you do it consistently, what you have is a track record of self-trust. And when you build a track record of self-trust, you won't need to rely on anyone else. You'll be like, I know I can do this. I know that actually if I really want something and I focus on it and I make a contribution to it every day, it's going to get me what I want, even if you don't know exactly what that thing is. But having an idea, you know, for me, when I started my business, it became clearer and clearer who I wanted to work with and what problems I wanted to help with them and why. Everyone else was running VIP days in fancy hotels. And I became the person that was like, do you know what? I really like forests. I really like outdoors. I really like comfort food. You know, and I think the people that I work with like it too. And so it's having that, for me, that was my brave step, was being honest about, I don't want to be like everyone else. I want to be like me when I'm on fire and enjoying myself. So get aware, identify from what you become aware of what your brave steps are. And it could just be decisions that you need to make. And based on those things, gather up the evidence to show you how you have made a difference to your future. I'm probably answering 17 questions with this, right? But highlighting, focusing on the lack of what you focusing on what you haven't got instead of what you want is a sure way to get you more of what you don't want. You have to shift focus, even if you have no idea how to get there. You know, the analogy I always use is if I'm driving to the Lake District, I know I'm going to the Lake District and I know roughly it's in that direction, but I don't expect it to be headlit all the way. It's just going to be the bit that's right in front of me. So, you know, if I drive with the road that's lit with the headlights, I can just keep driving. And then I can, you know, if there's a detour on the way, I take the detour. And if not, I'm still headed towards a place called the Lake District. But if you're focused on, oh, well, the problem is I'm in my house. Well, I'm still in my house. And, you know, I'm getting annoyed with the fact that I'm still in my house. Well, then I'm going to just stay in my house, aren't I? You know, I need to make some movement. It doesn't even matter if it's wrong. Just be in movement. I've sort of gone off on a tangent there. I apologise. Let me know if that answered those questions. I think one at a time, even if they're similar, is probably better. Otherwise, I will just waffle and try and cover two.
So the next question we have is, what does success look like, and how do you know when you've succeeded?
That's a completely subjective question. I mean, you know, so I was reading the book recently, How to Fail, with book club, and the big sort of rub was, well, I wouldn't say that was a failure. So in the same way, people would say, well, I don't think that's a massive success. To be quite honest, if I manage to keep the dining room table clear till the end of the week, that's a massive success for me. Now, some people think, oh, it's a massive success writing a book. It wasn't that difficult to write the book. There were different aspects for me that I deemed successful. So it makes no difference writing a book if no one buys the book and no one reads the book. And it's a self-help book. So if no one actually helps themselves as a result of the book, then it's not that successful. So for you, you have to work out what is the feeling that you get from success? What is the, how do you celebrate when you have a success? And generally, I think if I looked at all of the clients that I've got, it's when they do something that they previously thought wasn't going to happen. Now, the only way they get that success, therefore, is to do something that they have no guarantee will be true. So it kind of goes back to the last question, where if you're constantly operating well within your comfort zone and you're delivering things you've delivered time after time, you know, this is why I got tired of product development, is because the roadmap's always going to be the roadmap. The same people are always going to approve the business case. It's going to be the same committee that I have to go to track progress. And it was getting a bit, you know, even when I got a massive thing approved, I wasn't going, yes, success. Why? Because it was just the same. There was nothing new in it. So I'm inquiring now as I speak, is that just for me? No, every client that I've ever worked with has deemed themselves successful when they have taken a step of bravery and it's paid off. My job is to help them take the step of bravery, them not realize that it's paid off, and then have them see evidence down the line that actually it paid off. Even if the payoff was, I am never doing that again. You know, for example, my first webinar 4 years ago, I forgot to press broadcast. And I forgot to press record. So I spent the first 10 minutes doing sign language while people in the chat were trying to say, I can't hear you, can't hear you. I was so overwhelmed that I couldn't even manage the chat and speaking, and I was nervous. Now, you could say that was a failure, but for me, it was a success. I did my first webinar. I now know the first thing I'm going to do is press broadcast as soon as I get on a webinar. So, you know, you might not think that that was a success, but to me, that was a success. So if you have that vision that we just talked about, and it doesn't have to be like, you know, I want to be this in the world, and it doesn't have to be massive. It could be like my dining room table, right? By Friday, it's going to be clear. And you can feel yourself making a difference towards that. And then you achieve it at the end of the week. You're going to feel successful. So given that most people I work with are women in business and they're overwhelmed and they have too many decisions to make and they really, really struggle to focus, I think that the way that success is defined needs to get smaller and break it down, because every time you achieve one, it's going to give you that momentum to go and want to take another brave step and achieve another one. If your success is this massive thing that's so untenable, chances are genuinely you don't believe you're going to get there. And that's when you get into this sort of in-between energy, as I call it, where you're telling yourself that you want things, but you're actually so scared of taking the leap towards it that you don't take any action. And that just kicks off this inner critic soundtrack, which will keep you in the house rather than on the way to the Lake District. So success and how I decide it's defined should bear no relevance to you in conclusion to this question. However you feel when you're celebrating a success is what you need to sort of work back through to go, what are the sorts of things that can trigger that feeling? Because the more you experience yourself as a success, the bigger you'll play, and you won't have the problem from the last two questions of ever playing small. I hope that helped.
Thank you, Susie. And then we've got another two questions that are quite similar, but I'm going to just choose one.
Yeah, do them separately.
So this one is a little bit more specific. One is about vision and how to negotiate that. This is having the specific vision is communicated, and this vision is, how do you address wanting to take up senior positions but also retain a work-life family balance, wanting to work 4 days a week but feeling as though people don't take it seriously when that is put forward, but this person believes that they'll be able to deliver better if they can retain a balance in their lives.
So even from the first sentence of that question, remember, I'm challenging with kindness and a deep, deep concern that you get the answer that you need. So I could tell from the first sentence that you don't believe that that's viable, which is why you're not getting it. So this is the last chapter in my book. It's probably the favorite chapter. It's the story I quite often tell when I'm speaking at conferences. And it normally comes up when someone's asking for a pay rise. And I tell the story of my 4-year-old at the time who I would be watching Grey's Anatomy, and she'd come in and go, "Oh, I want to watch my program." And first of all, emotionally, that just makes me go, an interruption to something that was bringing me joy. How very dare she? But what she was doing was making a complaint. She wasn't actually asking me for anything. So I went through this process of educating her to say, Elise, don't tell me about the thing that is in the way of the thing that you want. Skip that part out and just tell me what you want. And so she started asking for what she wanted. She wouldn't complain. If she saw the TV and Grey's Anatomy on it, she'd say, "Mama, please may I watch Peppa Pig?" Progress, right? Because she's not complaining. Now she's focusing on the positive. So again, comes back to the first two questions. Shift of focus. What you want versus what not, against what you don't want. Then I thought, yeah, that's not quite enough, is it? Because she's going, "Can I watch Peppa Pig?" And there's something in her tone that tells me she's not expecting me to say yes. So I say no. And then she gets sulky. Bear with me on this story. So ask for what you want is not enough. Assume that you'll get it is the next part of that formula. When you start asking and assuming that you'll get it, people buy into the tone that you're speaking in. So it sounds like intellectually you know it will work, but in your heart you don't believe you're going to get it. That is my energetic response to that question, which I can see actually. The third part of the formula is to ask for what you want, assume you'll get it, without attachment to whether you do or not. Now, what we do when we're asking big deal questions of bosses at work is we put a lot of power into it, in the sense that we feel like life's going to be over if we don't get this. This is going to be, this will mean I'll have to leave the company, and it will mean that I never get to see my kids. And we get quite dramatic about it. I'm relating. The problem with that is it affects the tone that I talked about with the assuming that you'll get it. So rationally, impartially look at, okay, how would life work if that was the case? What objections would I have to handle if I was working 4 days a week? I absolutely believe you can transition from 5 days to 4. I did it when I went back to work after having my daughter. But there is no way I would have believed it was viable until I'd had maternity leave. Before I went on maternity leave, everyone was dependent on me because I'd set it up that way. My ego needed it, quite frankly. I would have a queue at my desk always. It helped my self-importance. Quite honestly, it was all ego payoff. And I tell you this with full vulnerability because I think it will give you some insight. It was only when I realized the world could operate without me when I was on maternity leave that I thought, okay, so they don't need me. But rather than having a bruised ego about that, I thought, right, how can I make this work to my advantage? We are about to exit one of the most unique times of probably your working career. And now is the time to leverage the fact that any default no that you might have got to that question previously has fallen away. All of the people that thought, well, I'll never be able to work from home, they'll never let me. Well, guess what? They had to now. So you have got a prime opportunity to not justify your position, not even really ask for permission, but lay it out like a business plan and say, looking at how productive I need to be, and not these words specifically, but coming up a level out of the emotion that you might be experiencing and going, I've looked at these moving parts and I believe they can be done in this time. And obviously, having been working from home, assuming you have been working from home over the last 2 months, it's kind of proved that flexibility pays off and da 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 da. And not justifying. I can't say that enough. When we start justifying, that's how we know we're not assuming that we'll get it. And once we've made our case, stop talking. Because when we continue to talk, we dilute what we just said. Every other word takes away from one that we just made the point with. So ask for what you want, assuming that you'll get it. And this one might be a stretch in this context, but without attachment to it being the case. If you still don't get what you want, then maybe it isn't the right place for you. What's the other question?
Super. Thank you, Susie. So the other question, which was related, I imagine would have been answered by that. So we can move on to the next one.
Okay.
Which is, have you experienced imposter syndrome and how did you deal with it?
I'd love to know if that person's ever heard me speak about imposter syndrome. I'm guessing not. Imposter syndrome is one of my topics. First, let me tell you about why it frustrates me when I hear speakers on imposter syndrome. I don't think it's very helpful to talk about a time when I was plagued by it and tell you stories about how I was stopped in my career. I think what you want me to say is, I've experienced it too, and so it's okay. And actually, I just don't think knowing you're not alone is that helpful. I really don't. Maybe my standards are too high, but I pride myself on these standards, which is that every moment you spend, including the ones on this session, are critical. They need to make an impact. Otherwise, what was it for? So have I experienced imposter syndrome? I'm sure I have, but this is a matter of focus. I don't focus on imposter syndrome. Why? Because this doesn't help me. How would that ever help anyone? Anything with syndrome in the title is not going to be helpful. So again, my daughter, my muse, she was talking to me in July last year. I was about to go and give a talk on how to kick imposter syndrome into touch, I think I called it, because I'm an ex-rugby girl. She said, what are you talking about tomorrow, Mama? And I said, oh, it's imposter syndrome. And she said, what's that? It doesn't sound very nice. I said, it's not. She said, what is it? And I said, well, it's when people, despite the amount of accomplishments they may have achieved, still believe that they're not worthy, still believe that someone's going to go, oh, what do you think you're doing? Come on, move along. And she was like, that sounds really bad. I said, yeah, it's horrible. And she said, do people choose to believe in that? I said, yeah, they do. She's 8. She was 7 at the time. She said, why? I said, it's a really good question. Honestly, here's what I think. Women, I'm going to go as far as saying women. Everyone could suffer from imposter syndrome. Men do suffer from imposter syndrome. Women like to claim it for some reason. Women will go to a bar with their girlfriend and drink rosé and bond over it. And I've surveyed this in men. I said, do you talk to your pals about this? And they went, no. I said, are you embarrassed to talk about it? They said, no. But, giving it airtime doesn't really seem to make much sense to me. And that's the point. So what we do instead, thanks to my daughter Elise, we came up with the unicorn effect. Now, what that does is it shifts your lenses. So I quite often do this with my clients and say, if you were to shift your lenses on that, what would you see differently? And what about if you assumed the best? What if you thought that every action you took counted? even if you thought there was a temporary, disadvantage or, don't like the word, failure involved in it, what if you were like, it had to happen that way. I see, I needed to experience that because then I could make the decision and do that differently. What if when I got made redundant 3 times, I thought, thank goodness I dodged those bullets, rather than went into myself and went, I knew I was never going to keep that job. I knew I wasn't good enough. That's just not true, first of all. But second of all, it's not helpful to me. So imposter syndrome is something that, again, of course, I've probably been affected by that, but I am so fast with my mindset to choose something helpful that I don't give it airtime. Why? Because it consumes you. It sucks energy out of you. It takes your confidence away. And those 3 steps that I talked about, awareness, bravery, and contribution, if all you're doing is looking at imposter syndrome, you're not going to be brave. You're not going to take any brave steps because you're too busy defending. And again, back to the first 2 questions, potentially, this could be linked. You're too busy defending your territory. You're too busy trying to prove that you're good enough here to let alone think about what could be going on over there. So, no, I'm not going to help you feel like you're not alone. I'm going to help you to desire something different and ask yourself, if this was a choice I was making, would I rather assume the best about everything, or would I rather be wading through imposter syndrome? I think I know which one you'd choose. If you had a young daughter, which one would you have them choose? I think I'd know which one. So I urge you to, and I'm going to talk about the book at the end, but I urge you to get the book and read through that section, because it's not just about imposter syndrome that stops us. It's fear of judgment. It's comparing ourselves with other people. It's all sorts of things that we, particularly as women, not just women, but particularly as women, we allow ourselves to be stopped by. And that's not to say that we should ignore these feelings and sweep them under the carpet, but it's getting aware of whether or not it is moving us forward. And it's normally pretty clear about whether it is or not.
Wonderful. Thank you, Susie. And the next question is, how can you be a strong leader and still maintain empathy?
So whoever asked that question, you need to read my book. I don't think so. So let me tell you about how I got to be the type of leader I am, because when I started off being a leader, I was fairly young, late 20s. I was a director, and I directed like I thought directors directed. I didn't really inquire as to who I was in that process. And again, I come back to the 3 steps. Awareness. You need to know who you are. And you don't have to dig too deep for that. You know who you are. The people that you value most in your life will tell you what your qualities are. The problem is when you think you lack, and you think there's a delta between where you are now and a great leader, you'll try and be like what you think leaders are like. And actually it takes away from all the goodness that you've got. The way to be the best leader, in my opinion, is to take what you have and market it towards your vision as purely as possible. And when I say purely, I'm saying not tainted by these, lenses of imposter syndrome or fear of judgment or worried about your performance, or all of that stuff is just a distraction from your focus. If you focus on just being who you are and stretching yourself gently and gently and gently towards what you want, you will be the best leader you can possibly be. The thing that gets in the way is your head. Your head is, yes, it's logical, and yes, it can make fantastic decisions, and yes, it can release creativity, but it can also talk you out of stuff. It can also dupe you into thinking stuff isn't good enough when actually it is. If you were to, actually, I did this in a talk. Someone was talking at me, asking a question. I said, I'm going to point to where you're talking from. And then they were talking from here and here and here and here. And then I asked them a question that was a little bit deeper. And their face dropped and their muscles relaxed. And I knew I'd gone here. how you get people out of their head is to be who you really are and not try and pretend to be anything else. To talk from your heart, which, you know, when I was a leader in my 20s, I thought would not be valued. I thought it would be weak, because talking from my heart at the time felt incredibly emotional. Whereas now, if I look at why I'm successful now, you know, people like me because I'm vulnerable and I'm honest. And if I don't know, I say I don't know. Or, you know, I shared a post on LinkedIn this week that said, you know, I gave a webinar and a courier nearly banged the door down halfway through. And the old me, who was trying to be a great leader, would have been mortified. I'd have been bright red. My inner critic would have been criticizing me the whole time, even though I've got no control about when people knock the door down, even there's a note on it. You know, so how I handled that was not to go into my head and go, how do I handle that? How do I handle that? How do I handle that? And overanalyze it. It was to go into my heart and go, well, you know what? I really cared about the people on that webinar, and I was speaking from my heart, and I think I delivered great value. And I was honest about what happened, and I was sort of funny when I came back to my seat and kicked my legs in the air when I'm back. You know, it's like, you know, I'm doing the best I can, and I am who I am, and not everyone will respond well to that. So I think that's what you've got to also take on board, is when you're being a leader, don't try and be like anyone else. Just be like you, because no one else can match that. No one else can do your personal brand. But if you're trying to copy someone else's, you're just going to look like a watered down version of them. So, you know, when you do that, you get balance. You're open about when things are happening in your family's life. You say, actually, can we not do it that day because it's sports day? And chances are they'll say, oh, sports day, oh, fantastic, and have a conversation with you at heart level where they can get to know you. Whereas if you've got this mask on all the time of imperfection, what are you teaching the people that you're expecting to follow you? You're teaching them that they can't make mistakes, they can't be honest, they can't be themselves. That's not valued. So to be the best leader, you have to create sounds really waffly, but create a space in which other people can be their best selves. And the only way you will do that is if you're doing it. So again, self-awareness, and my book will guide you how to get there. Brave steps that have you believing in yourself and building trust. And then contribution, which is effectively your track record of knowing that you're good enough where you are. So things like imposter syndrome can't survive there. And you're focusing on your future. It's about shifting your focus to the future, which you can do comfortably because you're happy with who you are right now. It's probably not the answer you were expecting, but it's what I believe.
Great. And then our next question is about how important are mentors in building confidence and helping you to form your vision, and how do you go about getting one?
I mean, absolutely. So if you have mentors, so we might have different definitions of mentors. So let me first define mine. So a mentor for me is it might not be a person, it might be like a compilation. So you know when you go on those face apps and it has a part of someone and a part of someone else and it looks like a real mishmash, well, that's what your mentor might look like. You know, you might look at, I love the way that person handles emotional struggle in their team, and I love the way that person really puts their point across, and I love the way, you know, you can pick elements of people and then use that to inspire who you are, not replicate. Again, going back to the previous question, this is not about replicating. This is about using them to inform the vision for yourself. And then you might actually talk to those people. So, you know, I have some mentors that don't know they're my mentors. They don't need to know, because what I'm looking at is things that they say that inspire me, actions I've taken as a result of things that they've said. Some of them I meet for coffee, but, you know, I'm a coach. I'd be a pretty fraudulent coach if I didn't have a coach. So I tend to invest in coaching where I have something specific that I want to achieve. So, you know, I have a tennis coach. I had a book coach to write my book. Why? Because it's not I didn't trust myself to do it, but I wanted to make it as easy as possible. And I knew that if I had guidance from someone that's written 12 books and is giving me one step at a time to focus on to get there and is keeping me accountable to do it, I knew I'd get it done. I wrote my book in 4 months, which is, and then edited it and tested it and la la la. But the fact is, I stuck to the plan. I don't think I would have stuck to a plan in that timely a way if I didn't have a coach. Equally, I have a business coach. I have someone that does life stuff for me. I don't have all these people at the same time, but when I know I have something that I want to achieve and I'm not there yet and I don't know how, I get a coach. And what that coach does is there's an element of teaching, which is where the mentor bit comes in sometimes. And then there's an element of just extracting from me what I've already got. But I've got this noise creating this fog that I can't quite see past on my own. I have a number of skills that mean I should be able to do a number of things. But when it's me and my business, I can't see clearly. You need someone to look at you. A mentor is relying on you to ask for what you need. But if you're not clear, what you really need is a coach. I hope that's helpful. How do you go about getting one was the next question. It depends which of those you're after. So if you're identify maybe the thing that you're trying to achieve. So maybe it's, I'm looking at the next question, maybe it's public speaking. Identify someone that you really admire as a public speaker. And, you might see that you're attracted to really energetic, rah people, or you might be moved by someone who can bring you to tears from the stage. Again, public speaking, different versions of good, right? And which one do you feel more aligned with? So if it's a mentor, I would go about it that way. Just pick one goal, and then, you might go, well, when I'm talking about this subject, it fits them, or build your picture. And if it's a coach, I can talk to you about that. You can book a call with me, susieramroop.com/booking. And if I don't think we're the best fit for your goal, I work with a number of people that I can put you towards that I would work with personally. Should we go to the public speaking one?
Yes, please. Thank you, Susie.
So my top 3 tips to practice public speaking are practice public speaking. Speak. And thank you, Nathan. So if there's a more specific, I'm sounding quite, I don't know what I'm sounding like. I can't think of the words today. I'm sounding flippant in relation to this, but the best way to practice public speaking is to speak. So, for me, for example, without beating my own drum, people say I'm an excellent speaker. Why is that? Because the main thing is because I really enjoy it. So some of the things that are, so I'm going on a different tack now. Public speaking, is that a gap you perceive you have? I guess is a question I need to know the answer to, because if I thought it was a gap that I had and I had to close it, so I can think back to when I was in my 20s and when I became a director, suddenly the table that I was speaking at was the board, and I hadn't had that experience before. And I remember my sort of warm-up session before that where I was presenting and I was holding something and my hand was literally visibly shaking, and I was thinking, oh my God, and I just wanted to die, quite frankly. It was awful. I didn't enjoy it at that point. How did I get to a stage where I now enjoy it? Well, it's mainly because of what I believe about it. So when I was doing that corporately, I thought there was a standard I had to match and that people would judge me if I was terrible. Obviously, people will still judge me now if I'm speaking and they don't like it. But I just think if they don't like it, well, then I'm just not for them. It doesn't really matter to me. It's not like they're going to troll me, hopefully. The people that are in the audience that loved me speak will come and speak to me afterwards or share about me on LinkedIn. The people that didn't like me probably won't tell anyone, and they'll just focus on the people that they did like. So, the risk factor for me is massively lower than it was before. Why am I such a good speaker? I genuinely think that it isn't actually all down to practice. I think it's partly down to practice, but it's because I just really love it. the reason I'm really loving this session is because I'm responding to what you're asking. If this was a webinar and I was going through slides, I wouldn't be enjoying it so much. And the experience that you would be getting is probably going to be less than that. So think about whether it is a deficit you believe you have, in which case there's probably a standard that you're trying to attain that you believe you can't. Or is public speaking something that you just love to do? In which case, join a book club and use your voice there. When you're in meetings at work, make sure that you put your hand up once or twice at least and speak. For me still, if I'm at a conference and I'm in the audience, I will always ask a question. Why do I do that? Because it scares me a little bit. And what's the payoff for that? Well, then people will know who I am if I remember to tell them my name, which I often self-sabotage and forget to do. This is just complete transparency. There are things I know I love and I'm good at those things. There are things I tell myself I don't love. I'm not so good at those. So I would start with the things that you love. And if public speaking is not one of those things, I'd ask, why are you making yourself do it? Is it necessary? Toastmasters could be the place for you. If you need it at work, you want to build that skill. Many people in my team, when I had one, used to go and speak at Toastmasters. If you are confident and passionate in the subject, it helps with public speaking. Yeah, absolutely, Harriet. Yeah, it does. But if you enjoy the speaking, actually a great example is Julia Cameron, who's an author, Hay House author. Incredibly accomplished. She's like the grandmother of authors. So all of the younger authors think that she's like, whoa, she's amazing. And every time she speaks, I saw her speak in November, she's terrified. And she says, all I do is I look out at the audience and I find one or two faces and I go, they look nice. Maybe everyone else is nice. And that's enough for her to park the potential judgment that she might be about to experience. So check into the story you're telling yourself. And yeah, as Harriet says, pick something you are actually passionate about to speak about. Would I recommend a specific coaching qualification? I don't know, to be honest. I qualified so long ago that I couldn't tell you now. I don't know. I would say before you get a qualification, you need to make sure you've been coached. There's a lot of, I don't know what the percentage is, something like 85 or even 92% of coaches make no money. Why? Because they've never had a coach. They've gone and done a course, but they don't really get what coaching is. If I think about how much I've spent on coaching, I don't want to think about how much I've spent on coaching, probably 6 figures, a lot, because I'm worth it and I can track the difference in that it's made in me. So, you have to work out, are you prepared to invest in yourself? And it doesn't mean you have to get an incredibly expensive coach, but you need to get one that is going to get the best out of you. I think that's the main thing. But start with my book, because it will then have you more aware of where you are now and what steps you want to take. And that might help you find a coach that is more targeted to the things that you want to develop in yourself. I'm going to talk about my book now, if that's all right. It's called, I might even share my screen if I can get the slides up. It's called Be the Leader You Want to See, and I'm going to just show you this picture because it describes what I've been talking about today. Hopefully this will work. This is quite complicated. I think it's this. So this is what we've been talking about today. So you get aware, and that the awareness that you get creates clarity. And when you take a can you still hear me?
Yes, all perfect, Susie.
Okay, sorry, just the camera went off, so I just got a bit confused there. So when you are aware, that's what gives you clarity. What you're aware of at that point might not look beautiful to you, okay? And if we're going to park judgment on that and just observe what it is, we can get clear about what is the next brave step that we need to take. Taking that brave step will create space. So typically when people are feeling overwhelmed and they're not sure what to do, like many of you probably feel today, and that's why you're here asking questions, what I'm trying to do is give you clarity so that you can take your next best step and clear some space. And there's this space clarity, it's like a figure of 8, that comes from going round that circle of awareness and bravery. And like I said before, this might be barely noticeable to anyone else, but it's noticeable to you. So you don't have to worry about fear of judgment. No one's going to see. Like I said, it's my dining room table. It's a success to me. I know when I've done it that I feel good about myself. Me feeling good about myself helps me take more steps. And that's really what I'm talking about here, because once you get into that pattern of space, clarity, that's when you start making a contribution. And really, it's about consistency. You've got to do that consistently. You can't do it once and expect to be done and dusted with your personal development journey. My journey is still not over. So the book is called Be the Leader You Want to See. And as I said, it's in response to you can't be what you can't see. That is totally untrue. You've got everything you need already. You just have to get clear about the direction that you're headed in, where your focus goes, and make sure that you're marketing that gold mine of talent that you're sitting on to the best purpose for you. So you might be caught in a trap where you're trying to complete a trajectory that was designed by someone else. This is about getting clear on what yours is and plotting it. And it doesn't necessarily have to end at the top of the organization. That's not what everybody wants. But progress towards your goal and your vision will be completely holistic. It's not just going to be about work. It's going to be about how you're the leader at home, how you're a leader at the netball club or wherever it is you hang out. So the official launch is the 10th of June. It is actually on sale now on Amazon, but I would love you to buy it on the 10th of June because I will be incentivizing purchases that day to enter a competition to win all sorts of things. Signed copies of, I should have taken the Women in Tech thing off, sorry. There's a conference ticket that is available. There's free coaching available. There's signed copies of my book available. And this is all for people that are buying it on the launch day and leaving me a review. So if you want to buy it now and leave me a review, that's fine. You can still enter. Just make sure that you contact me at susie@susieramroop.com. There is a resource here that I think might help you based on the tone set by the first 2 questions. We all play small in some area of our life. I still play small in certain areas. What I have is the awareness of when I'm doing it and the bravery to go hire an expert to stop me doing it so that I can make the contribution that I want to make. Going back to when I said I was going to write this book, I spoke at the BBC on Ada Lovelace Day and I told this elaborate story about how I could keep it on my USB stick for ages and never publish it. And that was part of me making myself accountable, because now they're asking me, when is the launch date? And it's the 10th of June. Why? Because I got aware of something that I had enough motivation to want. I took the brave steps, even though I've never written a book before. I was terrified of what it would take. And I hired a coach to get me there. And this is me now making my contribution with it. So there are 9 ways that you could be playing small in that document. They're not all professional. Hardly any of them actually are professional. Sometimes it's easier, quite often actually, to make changes in your personal life before you address your professional life. The weight of those decisions feels a lot less in your personal life. And the benefit of doing that is it's the same muscles that you would flex when you go into your professional life. If you're not used to asking for things that you want and assuming that you'll get it, you can practice that in your personal life such that when you start doing it professionally, it becomes a lot easier. I will say that will not let you download it if you use a work email. You need to use a personal email. And if you have any problems with that, just email me at susie@susieramroop.com. If you would like my help in the future, a really good place to start is to buy the book. I'm also running a retreat in September, which I think most people will be desperate to go on by then. And I also do private coaching as well. So if you would like to discuss either of those, then the booking link is there. And I would love to connect with you and hear what your number one takeaway was. These sessions that I've been running are totally different depending on the organisation that I'm running it for. I'm always really happy to learn from what I could have done better or what was powerful. So if you would like to message me once you connect on LinkedIn, or just say what you loved the most about this and what action you're going to take as a result, I would love to see that. And thank you for contributing today. I'm really pleased that we had lots of questions.
Super. And thank you from, I'm sure, everyone, Susie. It was a fantastic session. So much ground was covered, and I'm sure that there was a number of nuggets of information and inspiration for everyone. So thank you.
Good. My pleasure.